Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me for this session on Google Forms quiz mode. I hope you're having a fabulous Friday. In this session, we're going to just talk about Google Forms specifically being used as a quiz with students and how you can get that set up and going with your own class. So throughout the next hour, I'm going to go over the general settings for quiz mode, talk about how you need your form set up to make sure that it operates properly for your students. We'll go over what the locked mode on the student Chromebooks means. We also look at each of the different question types and have a peek at what those look like in the editor view, and then also from the student view, just to see all the different options that are there for question types. And then finally, we'll have a look at the scoring piece, both within Google Classroom and from the form itself after your students have completed the quiz. So to start a quiz with a Google form, you can start several ways. Right within Google Drive, creating a new file and going Google Form will get you in there. You can just type Forms New into the Omnibox in Chrome, and it will automatically create a new form that's stored in your Drive. And then you also have that option in Google Classroom to create a quiz assignment, which really just sets up an assignment with a blank form created there for you to go ahead and make that quiz on. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and jump over to a blank form and talk first just about the settings. So whether this was a blank form that I created right from the Forms app or from Google Drive, it would not be set up to be a quiz. If it was created from the Google Classroom platform, it would automatically be turned into a quiz already. So if you have set it up, if you have a form that you already have set up, but you have never used it with the quiz setting, you can change this setting in there as well. So new form, old form that's never been a quiz before, you want to go into the settings and make sure that it is toggled on to be a quiz. And then that will open up some of these other options underneath for that mode. And by default, it's going to tell the students how they did as soon as they submit the form. You can choose to change that to later after manual review, which definitely comes into play if you have questions that you need to go and manually score, like short or long answers. So you can set those settings here per form. And then this locked mode will only work on Chromebooks within the division, which is probably how you're going to be using this. I'm not demonstrating on a Chromebook, a student Chromebook in the division, so I won't turn this on for my demonstration purposes, just because that will actually lock me out of the student view. But if you turn this on for your students, the Chromebooks are up to date. That's important. And they are logged into their Google accounts. It will lock them into the Forms tab, and they can't go out searching other things. So that's what that means. Once in a while, we get some troubleshooting that it's not working for students. Number one reason is almost always that the Chromebook needs an update. And another thing can be that at some point along the way, a personal Gmail account has gotten synced with the student's work account or school account, pardon me, and that's what's interfering. So there are some troubleshooting videos and such on our website that walk through how to check for those things, and you can always reach out to me if you have a question about that too. And there's just a few more settings here for the answers. Once the students finish the quiz, you can decide if they're allowed to see on their responses which questions they got wrong, decide whether or not they get to see what the correct answer is, and then whether or not they can see the point values. By default, I think this one is often 0. I may have changed this already, but the one that I was working on earlier, it was definitely set to 0. So this just means when you go to add a new question, by default, how many points will be assigned to it. For each question, you can adjust that also. And I'll look at that a little further in depth when we talk about the question types. So these other settings apply to all forms, not just a quiz mode. This is set because we turned it into quiz and we have some other things toggled up here. It's automatically going to collect the student email addresses. Of course, the student email addresses are their 5-digit ID at wrps11.ca, and that doesn't indicate to you who they are. So quick tip is to have the first question on your quiz first name or name, and have them pop their name in there. There's also a video posted on our website and on our YouTube channel just recently that I've shown you a quick way to pull a class list out of PowerSchool into Google Sheets and then get those email addresses side by side with your student names. So that's possible too. And then also when you have, if you are looking at student email addresses within a Google, within the Google environment, so in a doc or a sheet or whatever, when you hover over them, it should show you student names also. So that's one little thing just to keep in mind, that even though you're collecting email addresses, that doesn't actually necessarily identify the students easily. And then we can decide to send a copy on a regular form. This is disabled because of the locked mode. The students wouldn't be able to go see the responses. You don't want them to go see each other's responses likely either. So that's all been disabled. And then some of these other things are set, as you see, by locked mode. In the presentation, we can choose to shuffle the question order. So if the kids are doing this all in the same room, they're not getting the questions in the same order and can't just be glancing at each other's screens and putting in the same answers, or it's not going to end well for them anyways. You can also go in here and edit this confirmation message that pops up at the end after they've submitted their form to something personalized if you would like. Again, locked mode is disabling some of these settings because we don't want them to be able to redo it and such. So if any of those settings are something that you don't want for your quiz for your students, it doesn't have to be a locked mode quiz. It can still be a self-grading quiz sent through Google Classroom without preventing them from going to other tabs. So that's just the difference there. So here I've got just a demo quiz set up with each of the question types that I'll go over what each of them are, and then what you have as options regarding setting them up for your students. So whether they're being self-graded and what kind of feedback they're getting, different types of questions actually have different options. So this is actually the student view. And there we are in the questions page. That's the one I want. Okay, so hopefully you can see that well. I have zoomed in. First and foremost, easiest and most obvious is the multiple choice question. This one has been set up already with an answer. So when I click on it, you can see the right answer with the little green check mark. To do this for a new quiz, you just click on the answer key and then choose the correct one. And then this is where you could also change the amount of points and then add some answer feedback. Something really cool about this is that you can actually like post in a video explanation or a link to some other outside resource for an explanation also. So I obviously in locked mode, a link to an outside resource wouldn't work, but the video should play on top of the form for them if you had a video there. And then you have the ability to give different feedback for incorrect and correct answers. So that question is set up for being graded. In the little 3 dots on each question, you'll see some extra options. What you see in here varies based on the question type. With a multiple choice, there's not some of the options that you see on other questions. It's fairly basic. Go to section based on answer is a bigger piece. If you want to have a form that's like sort of like a choose your own adventure story that, depending on how you answer, it goes somewhere. That's not going to apply to our quiz, but shuffling the option order on a multiple choice question could be useful, again, just to make sure that students are answering those questions on their own and not just following along with what they can see someone else doing. And on a quiz, we likely want to have all of the questions required as well. Just a couple other little buttons on each question you'll see is the duplicate button. This is really handy if you've got multiple choice questions where the answers are all going to be the same, because you can just duplicate them and then change those questions. And then, of course, the little delete button there to get rid of it. Any question or answer can also have an image added in addition to the text that's there, so that option is available as well. Of course, a multiple choice question from the student side looks like this. Moving on to checkboxes. Moving on to checkboxes. So these are multiple choice type questions where multiple answers can be selected. And again, if I just click on it, it will open in this editor view. I can see the question type, and then down here, answer key, the right answers are selected. And again, here's our feedback button. This one's been adjusted to accommodate that there's 3 correct answers. And then on this, we have the same option to shuffle those options for each individual user, so they will be in a different order for each student. And we would make that one required, of course, too. These checkbox questions on the student side just look like this, where they have the ability to check as many as they choose. So short answer and paragraph answer are your text-based questions. They have a default length, but when you go to set these up here in the 3 dots, you actually have an option called response validation, which allows you to change what the length is. So a short answer would typically be considered 140 characters, but you can actually go in and change what that character count is. A character, just a bit of math on that, 4.7 average characters in a word. So when they're doing maximum character counts, that's where you're at. About divided by 5 would give you sort of the words that you're looking for, because it does not give you words as an option, but just characters. So you can go maximum characters or minimum characters, as may apply to a paragraph type answer as well, and then choose the number there. And then you can also add the message that the students will get on their screen warning them that they have gone past the length. So those, again, these two look very similar. When we go to look at the answer key for those, there is no option to put in a right answer on the paragraph. With the short answer, you can put in answers, keeping in mind these will be case sensitive, have to be spelled correctly for the system to automatically mark them for you. So then it has this option here to decide if you are marking the other answers that are input wrong, or just to accept anything that's put in, but also to match those correct answers. So that's the short answer one, a little different than the paragraph, where in the answer key we could just put in some feedback that it would give the student when they had finished that question. These two on the student side just have, of course, the box, and this will expand as per our settings and allow them to type in as much as they need to. A drop-down question is like a checkbox list or a multiple choice question where there is a drop-down with many choices. This is probably best used if you have lots and lots of choices, just to save some space on the screen. They will all just be in that drop-down list. So as with the checkbox questions, there can be multiple correct answers. They're set up here. You can see which ones are correct. And again, we've adjusted the points manually for that. And then this has that same shuffle option order if you want to change those for each student. And then we can make it also required. From the student side, This question shows that drop down, and then when opened, they can go in here and choose one answer. Again, so it can have multiple correct answers, but the students are only choosing one. Linear scale used for ranking or rating, most likely. So when we go and look at the answer key, similar to the paragraph, there is not an option to have a correct answer in here. We can simply adjust the points, give some answer feedback. On the options, the only option here is to just add a description. So this can be done on any question to just add some additional information to the actual question. And then on the viewer side, the linear scale looks up like this. On the editing side, you have the ability, of course, to choose what these labels say. They can actually not even be there if you choose. And then you also have a choice in these range of numbers up top, all the way up to 10. Getting into some of the more interesting or complicated question types, the multiple choice grid is really good to sort out if you have questions that would have multiple answers. So say we're talking about climate and weather, for example, and then we can put those in the rows, and then we can have some conditions in the columns, and that can all just be answered in one question instead of having several multiple choice questions with the same answer selections. When you set this up, well, that jumped quite a bit. Just as with the other multiple choice and checkbox one, you just go in and choose the correct answer for each row in this case. So here we've got one right answer for each row, and they're each worth a single point. On the student side, they see this, and then they can go in and choose their correct answers. As it's only taking one answer per row, when they check a different box, they would be choosing a different answer. The multiple or the checkbox grid, just like the checkbox question that we looked at earlier, gives you a little more flexibility to have multiple checks in a single row. So same type of setup. When we go to look at the answer key, see that we have in some of these rows 2 correct answers, and the other 2 rows there's just 1 correct answer. So that's that flexibility, and then also to adjust those points there so that we can make sure that this is scored for all of the correct information. This one, we could also decide that they only choose 1 per column. So by default, it's going to have the ability to choose more than 1, but we could also limit that. And then we could shuffle those rows to give that change up again within the class screens. Over on the viewer end, this one just looks like this, where we can go ahead and select our answers that way. So the date and the time questions cannot be actually auto-scored. So there is no way to go in and put an answer in this or in the time one. The students on their view will get a calendar selector with a navigation like this so that they could go through and choose a date. Same with the time selection. We just have this time entry option here. And then last but not least is the question option to be able to upload a file. So anything that gets uploaded, there would be a folder created in your Google Drive. You can see that there's actually a shortcut link to it here, right on the question as well. And then students can choose a file to upload. So this is the editor view. They're not going to see this view folder. That's just for you so that anything that they upload can be here. You can toggle this on so that you can say that it has to be a particular type of file that is being uploaded. You can also limit how many files are being uploaded and actually even manage the size of those if you choose. So this is where students could upload any of these things from their Google Drive directly to the form. That's going to put a link to it in the responses part when you get there, and then also pop it into that folder here that you've got all in one neat place. So that's actually something that probably doesn't get used hardly ever, but could be really useful. I'm not sure everybody knows that it's there. So that is all of the different question types in Google Forms in a nutshell. We talked about the settings. I didn't go over some of the other.
But I found these results on search.
I didn't go over some of the other setup options and things, such as being able to customize the theme. But of course, you have all of those options available too when you're setting this up, and didn't cover some of the other things that you can add. So these were all question types found under the Add a Question spot. You can import questions from another Google form. So that's handy if you've been doing quizzes throughout the semester, quarter, year, etc. And then you want to do something sort of a cumulative thing at the end and finalize, you could go back to those previous quizzes and import some of the questions to make something new, or if you're doing a redo or something like that, that can be really useful. Also, you can add just some text in between questions where needed. You can put an image in before or after a question, and as well as a video. And then this section piece is where you can have different chunks of the form to go through, and then that's where that selecting different answers based on your, or going to a different section, pardon me, based on your answer would come into play. So that's getting further into the creating like a choose your own adventure type form, and again, probably not really applicable to a quiz type setting like this. So there's the file upload from the viewer side. Just click the button and then it's going to open this box and let me go ahead and either upload something directly from my device or go to my drive or recent and attach something from there. Once they are done, hit the submit form. At that point, if you've chosen to give them feedback, they'll have a button to see that. Otherwise, they will just be told that it's over and to close out of that window and they'll be all finished. And then if you have shared it through Google Classroom, it will give you the notification that it's been done and submitted in there. So when I click on it over here in Google Classroom, I can see now that 4 of my students have submitted the form, and I'm all ready to go and look at those results. That's nice for the students too, so they don't have to come back to Classroom and hit the turn in button. Like I say, when they hit the submit button on the form, it automatically turns it in Google Classroom too. So from Google Classroom specifically, so I mentioned at the beginning, you can start a quiz assignment right from here. I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So notice it creates this blank quiz. Like I said, when I showed you the blank quiz that we started with, it just automatically turns on the quiz mode and sets some of those default settings rather than you going into settings and flipping that toggle. That's really the only difference. You can remove this form from here and pull one from your drive that you already have created. Any form, whether you've set it as a quiz mode previously, when you attach it to this quiz assignment in Google Classroom, it will automatically turn it into a quiz also. So it flips that toggle for you. And you want to make sure if you're using Google Classroom to store and collect grades in any way, shape, or form, you want to make sure that you have the grade importing on. Otherwise, if you use a spreadsheet or you're just putting them directly into PowerSchool, you may find just dealing with the responses directly from within the form easier. You'll see all of the grades there. You can grab them in a spreadsheet so that they can be copied and pasted again. But if you are doing grading in Classroom at all, sharing that with your students, or you happen to pull a whole bunch of grades out of there at the reporting times or something like that, you'll want to make sure you have the grade importing piece toggled on. That's just going to bring their scores from the form into the Google Classroom. I'm just going to close this out. So that's just the creating that from within Classroom. when I click on here and see that 4 students have completed this, not like other things like documents and slides and such that are attached to a Google Classroom assignment, there isn't something here to click on. It just lets me know that they've each submitted their form. And I'm not seeing anything on the grades for this either because I haven't imported them yet. So even though that toggle switch is toggled, I still have to import the grades. Here, if I make any changes to the grades within the Google form, then I would have to come back here and update also. So again, this is just to be collecting grades in Google Classroom. If you're not doing them there, you don't have to worry about that import grades piece at all. So this is the form for the quiz that we were just looking at the results for in Google Classroom, and probably the most useful way to go over student responses. This is a multiple choice quiz, so it worked really well as a multiple choice. I'm not probably going to have to go in and manually change any of the scoring in here, although I could if I wanted. But this is where I can see how my students did and which questions that they got wrong. And I could also go and give them some individual feedback. And you can see I had these options to send them a video or a link along with my text feedback as well. So up top, I have 4 responses to look at. We can look at these. I think actually it starts on this summary page. I was already toggled over here. We could look by question. This could be useful if I want to see how if all of my students did really poorly on a single question, etc. And then the individual responses goes by student, which is sort of your teacher, going through and marking that quiz. We'll see Mary forgot to put her name on here. Good thing it wasn't worth any points. And I can just toggle between my students. You can see here, you could also print the response out if you wanted to have a copy of those on paper and go through them this way. I have another example to look at where there are some questions that would need to be manually scored. So again, within my responses tab, looking at the individual responses as I go through, this is a question that is short answer. This is the quote unquote correct answer and the feedback that's there. But now as a teacher, this is where I can go in and manually score these. I can just assign points to it and then give the individual feedback. So I can't actually take away the red X and that it's marked wrong. I don't love that, but I can go in and give some more feedback here. Notice as soon as I start making changes that I get a big banner at the bottom, and I actually have to manually save these changes to this grade as I'm going through. So we can go through a student response. The multiple choice stuff has been automatically scored. Some of the short answers and long answers, maybe file uploads, I'm going to have to go in and manually deal with. Once I've gone in and done that work, I can hit the save button and it's going to change the student's score. So back on the Google Classroom page, if you're using that, I would have to go back there and import those grades again. You can also just see right here, she got 5 out of 7 and record that. However, I can hit the release score button to let Mary know how she did. When I hit that, I can decide to just let Mary know, or I can also decide to send them to my whole class at this point in time. And then I always also have this option to see all of the responses to the Google form in a spreadsheet. So if I just click that, it will want to create a new spreadsheet. And then it will automatically open up in the new spreadsheet with those responses. And then there is a column where it's recording just that raw score as well. So I think I have hit the end of what I had to say. That went very quickly. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to send me an email and ask me, and I'll do my best to answer it if I can. I hope you have a great weekend.